Our next guest is a Republican in favor of accountability. Congressman Adam Kinzinger of Illinois joins us now. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us. First of all, I want to get your reaction to day one of the trial. Were you surprised that Senator Cassidy did change his vote?
Yeah, he's been hard to figure out. I'm not overly surprised. I think he's a principle-driven guy. But it was definitely a surprise, and I think a pleasant surprise. And I think it's indicative of, quite honestly, how poorly the defense did in their performance.
Did that surprise you? I mean, clearly the president, has had problems with paying attorneys, with keeping attorneys. Did it surprise you just the nature of their argument or lack thereof?
Yeah, it did a little bit. I mean, I didn't think it was going to be powerful because how do you defend what happened on January 6th and the events leading up? You don't. But I guess to these attorneys' credit, they got on the case a week ago, and now you have to put up a pretty serious defense. But yeah, it was certainly outmatched. And I actually thought the prosecution did a good job.
Yeah, I mean, what stood out to you today?
So I didn't see all of it, but I'll tell you the parts I did see, it was methodically, not necessarily just out of emotion, out of fact, laying down what happened, which I think sometimes we forget out of the emotion of what happened on the 6th. We've kind of walked away. But I thought the most powerful thing was how they opened it, showing the video, showing stuff that we hadn't seen on the internet before, having the subtitles and the words people were saying, with Trump. And I think anybody, at least, even if you don't want to vote to remove, if anybody had to doubt that this was, Antifa or BLM or a false flag operation, after that, there's no way you can. And unfortunately, there were people that did, in fact, believe this wasn't, what it was.
It was interesting to me because we've all seen a lot of some of that video, or a lot of it, certainly. But there was something about putting it in what seemed to be a chronological thing where there was juxtaposed what the president was saying, what the crowd was saying, what was happening inside the House chamber at the time, and just sort of the small moments of horror and brutality against law enforcement personnel. I think back to the president saying he was the law and order, the former president saying he was the law and order president, and those people who were attacking the Capitol saying they're patriots. When you see them attacking individual police officers, calling them names, torturing them in some cases, it really just, even though some of these videos have been seen before, I just found that very incredibly disturbing.
Yeah, it's amazing to me because as a supporter of police officers, but also a person that recognizes we need reform in some areas, to see these folks with, the thin blue line flags and this law enforcement stuff, using those to beat law enforcement officers. I mean, it's incredible. I've become friends with one of the gentlemen, I won't name him, but that was involved in that and was really hurt. He's a police officer. And to hear his stories, he said, these people are walking around acting like they support law enforcement officer, and they're saying things that are chilling. It's like, I think there was, not to get overly spiritual, for me, there was just a serious level of evil that descended over that. And you see what happens when you take rhetoric and you let that anger go overboard. And I think the president bears serious responsibility for what we saw on the 6th. And it's not just his speech that day. It's the 4 years of building the groundwork leading up to that.
Part of it, I think, just based on what you were just saying, it comes to mind, the idea of otherizing people is something I think we saw a lot of over the last 4 years. I mean, it's something we've seen a lot over the last decades, but it's so easy to otherize people, to make people other than American, other than patriotic, other than human, and we've seen it in Bosnia, we've seen it in Rwanda, where radio was telling people, Hutus were telling the radio listeners that Tutsi were cockroaches, getting them ginned up for genocide. And you see it in these videos where people who claim they are patriots are in the face of a police officer calling him, as we're seeing it right there, and gouging out the eye of one, squeezing one in, suffocating one in a doorway.
It's incredible, and that's the huge problem, Anderson, is not even our political dialogue. That's a huge problem. But that's a result of the fact that we've picked tribes in this country. You're either on the left tribe or the right tribe. And anybody that's not on your tribe, even if they're not on the other tribe, they are seen as the enemy. And I've said before, kind of facetiously, but kind of not, I feel like if California got a nuclear missile that, some on the right would say, well, good, less electoral votes for the Democrats. And, if Texas got it, some on the left. I just think the bottom line is we have to understand each other's humanity. You can disagree, but as we saw in a commercial that's made the round, we have common ground and we're standing on it. This is our earth. This is our country. This is us. And we need to see the humanity in each other, and we're just not.
You wrote an opinion piece in the Washington Post, and you said, quote, impeachment offers a chance to say enough is enough. It ought to force every American, regardless of party affiliation, to remember not only what happened on January 6th, but also the path that led there. And you went on to say, the further down this road we go, the closer we come to the end of America as we know it. What message do you think Senate Republicans are sending about who are voting not to proceed with this, or who voted not to proceed with this, about where their priorities lie for the future?
So, I'm not going to judge individual, but I'll tell you this. If it's politics, which is why you would not vote to remove, that's the wrong answer. This is one of those moments. And by the way, I have to promote this. Go to countryfirst.com with a 1ST. I do a video on there where I talk about kind of how we've gotten to this place and where we need to go. But the bottom line on a vote like this, in a moment like this, is it has nothing to do with your election, your reelection, what your career is. Anderson, we ask young men and women to give their lives to defend this country, and we appreciate that, as we should. And yet we're unwilling to give our own careers for a cause of the country. The juxtaposition of that still just kind of maddens me sometimes.
CNN is reporting that the former president is fixated on retribution against Republicans who are voting against him. How much do you think that looms in the minds of Republican senators and again, not individuals, but just how much do you think it looms in their mind? And do you worry yourself about retribution from him?
I don't fear the president at all. I mean, I really don't. The bottom line is I'm fine if I'm not reelected, because I can look at myself in the mirror and I feel real peace. And when I have kids someday, I think they'll be proud of this. That's where my peace is. I feel accountable to God, and I feel like it's the right thing. In terms of others, look, yeah, it's certainly fearful. Because they have envisioned some their entire life being in politics and being who they are. There's nothing wrong with that ambition. But then when that ambition goes above things like, do we defend the Constitution? I mean, what happens if the next president does this again? And if that person happens to be a Democrat? We have no moral authority whatsoever to be outraged about anything now, because we've lost that moral authority with this relativism.
I definitely recommend you have kids. I just tried it. It's a really good thing. You'd be a great dad. Congressman, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
You bet.